trials and tribulations, they stood tall and brave. A prophetic vision, the path that they paved. In the sacred grove, where the heavens met earth, a faith was ignited, a reawakening of worth. Through pages of history, the stories unfold, of love and of struggle, of courage so bold. Oh, doctrine and covenants, words written in grace, revealing a journey leading us to a sacred place. With every verse sung, we feel the peace descend. In the whispers of the past, our spirits mend.
Welcome to Appointed Time and Place, Joseph Smith History. This is Doctrine and Covenants number 4. You can always find us at Prophetic Appointments. And I'm Farrell.
And I'm Rhonda Pickering.
And get right into the text and talk about Joseph Smith's history. This is a really fun part of the gospel. It's quite well known amongst us in the circles of, for sake of a term, Mormondom, to talk about Joseph Smith's history, because it is very common to the whole people in the Joseph Smith story. And I'm really, really grateful for that. But at the same time, we should never underthink it, because it's become such a common understanding place, the first vision and the angel Moroni. So let's just jump right in. During the space of time which intervened between the time I had the vision, so we're talking about the first vision, and when he's 1823, which makes him 18 years old, having been forbidden to join in the religious sects of the day, and being of very tender years, and persecuted by those who ought to have been my friends, and to have treated me kindly, and if they supposed me to be deluded, to have endeavored in a proper and affectionate manner to have reclaimed me, I was left to all kinds of temptations and minglings with all kinds of society. So what he's saying is, because I was so rejected, I had to find friends. And he ended up finding friends who probably weren't real good churchgoers, I would guess, is what he's saying here. He had to find friends amongst those who would not judge him so harshly, which is kind of fascinating. And he says he fell in all kinds of temptations. And of course, he goes on to say later, which I guess we're going to get to, that that doesn't mean he did these major kind of sins. He just got into levity and light-mindedness and just having a lot of fun in his days. I love this picture of him doing stick poles, because I've enjoyed doing stick poles, kind of like Joseph used to do. We actually did that in a seminary when I was in high school. We had a big stick pole contest, and kind of in that age.
You would have probably done well because you've got a lot of upper body mass.
I always did.
Yeah, you just yank people over.
I
Yeah,
guess that's why I enjoyed it. I liked it because I was good at it. That's for sure. I was one of the tougher ones of the class, and that always made it nice to be the one that would always throw people over. Anyway, I think frequently fell into many foolish errors and displayed the weakness of youth. You all know what that is. I mean, sometimes uh, people would like to think maybe it was, you know, morality issues, but I get the impression from what he says, absolutely no morality issues, just a lot of
Right. He says it there at the bottom that he has a native cheery temperament.
Yeah. And I love that about the prophet Joseph Smith, and I have a hard time finding that to be sin. You know?
Yeah, we read in the last time we were talking about, all those structures about the persecution. It said that telling the story of the first vision was the cause of much sadness in his life. I mean,
Yeah, well, he got so hit back with it,
yeah.
I get it. When you stick your neck out on the line for things, you can bring a lot of persecution on you, or a lot of heat, if you want to call it that. The foibles of human nature, which I am sorry to say led me to diverse temptations, offensive in the sight of God. In making this confession, no one need suppose me guilty of any great malignant sins. So he clears that up, that it's not, this is, he wasn't going around knocking off the stores down the streets of Palmyra or anything that way. He just was getting into a lot of levity, and he goes on to say that here in a minute.
Well, Moroni is going to tell him right before it's time to finally get the plates out of the hill. He's going to give him that severe chastisement and basically tell him that you're not being focused enough on the importance of what is about to happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think there's a different measuring stick going on here.
Well, I think Joseph had a big mission, and it was he had a lot to live up to. Let's face it. He was not the normal boy. Um, a disposition to commit such was never in my nature. In other words, he's saying, I was never really the guy that wanted to go, um, you know, steal or rob or participate in um, morality problems, but that he just liked having a good time. He liked joking around and being a kid, I guess. But I was guilty of levity and sometimes associated with jovial company. There you go. He's just having a good time I've seen it in school. We all know what it's like to be in our teen years and enjoy, a lot of games, a lot of fun, a lot of activity there.
Cow tipping.
The cow tipping. Mater. No. Anyway, so he's saying, not consistent with that character, which ought to be maintained by one who has called of God, as I have been. But this will not seem very strange to anyone who recollects my youth and is acquainted with my native cheery temperament. I think that part of Joseph Smith was actually a blessing to him because, having a cheery temperament helps you be positive when negative things are happening. Don't you think?
Yeah.
I actually think that's a good thing. I always have longed or worked towards having a more cheery temperament because um, I think that it helps people not be so tense around you. And so I appreciate that. If there's anything in The Chosen I absolutely love is how relatable they have made Christ in the series of The Chosen. They have made him so relatable, and he even jokes around with the apostles, and I don't know how true it is, but I like it. And I just really think it's given that same temperament here we're talking about that the prophet Joseph obviously had, which I'm very grateful for, actually, that optimistic, upbeat nature. So I think that's good. In consequence of these things, I often felt condemned for my weaknesses and imperfections. Boy, do I relate to that. I have felt those feelings, growing up and all the different times in my life. And on the evening, the above mentioned 21st of September, after I had retired to my bed for the night, I betook myself to prayer and supplication to Almighty God for the forgiveness of all my sins and follies, and also for a manifestation to me, that I might know of my state and standing before him, for I had full confidence in obtaining a divine manifestation as I previously had one. What a beautiful thing. He had full confidence that he could go forward, and he wasn't disappointed.
Well, I think that, they have a little saying that people that have had visionary experiences, people that have seen the other side and stuff, it's almost like when they come back to this world, they keep a toe in the door. There is no more doubt of the reality of
The
that
afterlife,
world.
yes.
And so it's normal to have further experiences once you've already had one.
Which totally
And I'm
makes
sure
sense.
that plays into this. And
It's faith.
plus the fact that Moroni told him that he would be staying in touch.
Well, he hasn't seen Rona yet
Right.
at this point.
This is true.
This is
This
his
is true.
first encounter
We're
with
on the
Moroni.
first encounter with Moroni.
Okay, so we're about to have this first experience where he encounters Moroni for the first time. Now he's encountered the Father and the Son, and that's
Right.
you.
And the fact that I still think there was a little bit of that you will be in touch type thing going on.
Sure. Well, it would just be a natural thing to believe that, I guess.
Yeah.
I think so. While I was thus in the act of calling upon God, I discovered a light appearing in my room, which continued to increase until the room was lighter than noonday. When immediately a personage appeared at my bedside, standing in the air, for his feet did not touch the floor. The one thing I noticed probably more than any other thing when I went to the Joseph Smith home and Palmyra there, um, was all the kids were in that room with him. That's the first thing that come into my thoughts is, my goodness, the whole room lit up like noonday. Wouldn't that have woken his brothers and stuff that were with him? Um, so that's always been an interesting thing since I actually visited Palmyra and observed that. I thought, oh my goodness, all of his brothers are there. And I thought, you know what? There's something about visionary experiences that are quite singular in their um, who they're to. I was thinking about Paul when he's on the road to um, Emmaus, not Emmaus. Is it? It is the road to Emmaus.
He was to Damascus.
Damascus. That's what I thought. It was on the road to Damascus, and he experiences the Lord. The people with him just experienced the shaking, right?
Yeah, and the light.
They did
So
experience the light. Well, when Daniel got his vision, the people with him that were similar, they did not see the vision. So it's not that's not uncommon in Scripture that the people around you don't experience the same vision. So it's like this is honed into your frequency. It's like each one of us have our own um, tuning, you might say, and that he can tune into our frequency and talk directly to us.
I think that that's a fascinating word link here, in light of Isaiah, when in the end time it says that the your darkness has been overtaken by the light, and that the your twilight, we is the dawn of is dawning at noonday. And again, this is what I wanted to note here is that when it was lighter than at noonday, that means the personage is there. And so in the other scriptures, when it's talking about the light dawning and then becoming noonday, the noonday is when Jesus is there. And so again, you have that dawning of the day of the Lord in the end time and in scripture.
Yeah, but in that wording, my room was lighter than noonday. That's
Yeah,
fascinating.
that means the personage is
So,
there.
you would assume the light would be almost shining out of the windows bright and it'd attract a lot of attention. But I'm realizing that there's a like the visions like this seem to be frequency oriented, frequency of light that is tuned in to the individual receiving it.
Well, and there's a little clue too at the end where it says, and his feet did not
Touch the
touch the
floor.
floor.
So
Because-
perhaps Joseph was looking into a higher dimension.
exactly. What I'm saying is, excuse me, what I'm saying is
His
that
eyes were open to a higher dimension, not them coming into our dimension. Just a thought.
exactly when a higher dimensional being actually puts his foot down on the earth, there's
Big good result. Yeah,
cataclysmic
yeah,
results from that.
absolutely seems so. So that's really really fascinating. Um, this representation of him being there in the bed, I think, is probably not completely accurate because of the fact he actually was sharing that room with all his brothers.
They have some beautiful
Yeah,
notes
they
with all
do.
the
Yeah, I know,
illustrations
I
and
get that, but it's still fun to realize that this was an incredible. Um, I'm going to say it's an incredible experience for you and I, because really, without this, without the visitation of Moroni, coming to the prophet Joseph and revealing the location of the Book of Mormon and the whole restoration, you and I would be stuck in the Christian sects of the day thinking. We would not have received such a beautiful interpretation of the gospel that I believe that um, the truth of the restoration gives us. We have such a more incredible depth to our understanding than the average Joe, if you want to call it that way. His definition of the angel Moroni is not only was his robes exceedingly white, but his whole person was glorious beyond description, and his countenance truly like lightning. Ooh,
you just love that when you're talking about resurrected beings and mighty angels. It's they have the voice of thunder and their countenance is as lightning. I mean, just stop for a minute and imagine what this is like. No wonder he's about to be afraid for a minute.
yeah. I love this right here. The room was exceeding light, but not so very bright as immediately around his person. It's like this glory is is inhibited by this dimension. I don't know. And it's not as bright going out, but looking right where he stood, which was probably at a higher level.
Well, it's also a mark of a celestial level because in the scriptures we're told that the terrestrial is like the glory of the moon, and the moon is reflecting the light of the sun, but the celestial emits its own light source.
I love
It's
that.
putting forth light.
I think this is a very common thing. When I first looked upon him, I was afraid, but the fear soon left me. So I think it would be natural to be a little afraid when you're exposed to that much of a powerful being. I think it would be natural to feel less than. Um, he called me by name. I love that. He called him by name and said unto me that he was a messenger sent from the presence of God to me, and that his name was Moroni. That God had work for me to do, and that my name should be had for good and evil amongst all nations, kindreds, and tongues, or that it should be both good and evil spoken of among all people. Um, what a mission! What a mission Joseph received as an 18-year-old boy. That's when he first received this calling, if you want to call it that way. He kind of at the first vision got exposed to, that there was more, but he didn't really know where to go with that for 3 whole years. From the first vision to time he's 18, he's just kind of in limbo, to and fro, if you might say,
Yeah, and we just read that he was forbidden to
to
join
join
any of the
yeah,
churches, right?
which in and of itself would have made him a little outcast.
Exactly, yeah.
He's the guy who don't join the church or don't, you know, um, that's pretty incredible. And we all think, this 10-year period between, well, in this instance, 7-year period, which is fascinating that it's a 7-year period between the first vision and when he actually takes the plates out of the hill Cumorah. Um, that's huge. That, and it's right in his impressionable years. He's trying to figure things out.
Little over seven,
Yeah,
7.5.
yeah. So that's pretty amazing that he is in that place of just kind of trying to figure it all out as a young man, like we all do. I mean, a lot of modern people are on missions during some of that time, where just after this moment, he gets called on a very big mission at 18, I guess. That's pretty incredible. So he said there was a book deposited, written upon gold plates, giving account of the former inhabitants of this continent and the source from whence they sprang. He also said that the fullness of the everlasting gospel was contained in it, as delivered by the Savior to the ancient inhabitants. Wow. We've heard this story so many times that I can imagine that most of us, it gets to be yesterday's news a little bit. And yet, when you stop and think about it, it's one of the greatest stories ever told. We are in a situation where one of the greatest, another testament of Christ, as we call it, is brought to us to give us more insight, give us more clarification. I think it's just incredible to realize the power and the beauty of the mission that the prophet Joseph Smith fulfilled in our behalf, really, in the behalf of the Gentiles. Um, and the other thing that's really fascinating is that he's told about the Urim and Thummim, the two stones in a silver bowl, and these stones fastened to a breastplate constituted what is called the Urim and Thummim. Now, in ancient Israel, it is referred to in the Bible, the Urim and Thummim is.
Urim and the Tumim,
Yeah,
the
say it.
lights. Urim and Tumim.
So,
And it means lights and perfections. And gosh, we just did a lesson on crystals and light and the anisotropic stones in the high
yeah,
priest breastplate. And when it says lights and perfections, that
a
sets
whole
a
new
whole
definition,
new
which we don't have
dimension.
time to take
Yeah.
that rabbit trail today. But somewhere along the
But if
way.
you want to, you can study isotropic and anisotropic stones in pure light and the difference. And that's pretty
It
fascinating to
is pretty
study.
fascinating. Okay, and they were deposited with the plates, and the possession and the use of these stones were what constituted seers in the ancient or former times, and that God had prepared them for the purpose of translating the book. So when we say someone is a seer, they might have the calling to be a seer, but unless they're using the gift, they're not actually acting in the role of a seer. A seer is actually one who is using that gift to bring to pass revelation and in that way, in a complete fullness of the term revelation and translation or whatever.
So I just love this picture. Note just a few things. Number one, um, Joseph actually showed the Urim and the Thummim and the breastplate to others that of course recorded and uh, Lucy says that the actual breastplate
It was too big for it.
was huge. It was way too big for him to wear. But also I noticed that
Jaredites. It was built
yes,
initially
for mighty men,
for
right?
mighty men. Yes.
And that also notice that the plates here, the way they're pictured, even though Joseph wasn't showing them to people, but you can see that how much of the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon we don't have. I mean, that's according to the descriptions that they had, the greater part, the more part of the Book of Mormon we have not received yet.
So that's pretty fascinating. And when we consider the idea of Joseph Smith translating the scriptures or whatever, and sometimes we want to think how it'll be cool to translate. And you even have people claiming they've translated or given the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon, but it'd be a hard time getting any of them to, I guess what's the word I'm looking for, to have done it with seer stones and as a seer would.
Yeah, and a lot of the earlier accounts, they talk about, well, and sometimes even when we talk about the translation of the plates in approximately a 3-month period after they lose the first 116 pages, um, there is one aspect there that Joseph Smith had already for many months been learning to use the Urim and Thummim. It wasn't just magic, which we see when Oliver Cowdery tries to translate. You have to study it out in your mind. He had to study the characters, and the translation process was something that he developed and polished as time went on.
I talked about this in a previous video that I think our spiritual muscles have to be exercised.
Yes,
Also, you
absolutely.
can't just go immediately and have spirituality. You have to practice and
And like
exercise
Sidney Rigdon,
spiritual muscle,
and
so to
like
speak.
Sidney Rigdon, when he has the vision, DNC 76 at the John Johnson home with Joseph Smith, and in the presence of all the elders, they notice that Sidney Rigdon is just drained and exhausted,
Wiped out.
and Joseph says he's not used to it as I am.
I once heard a guy who this was actually a Christian preacher, and he was an associate I got to know out in Hawaii, and he says, after I preach, I'm exhausted because I feel like I've had 440 running through me.
Exactly
I
right.
think there's some truth to that. When you have the Spirit of the Lord come upon you, if you're not um, spiritually healthy, I'm going to call it, yeah, it's going to completely wipe you out. And if
And we're
it's,
about to see this where
yeah,
Joseph collapses, right?
right. So in his early days, he experiences that. Behold, the day cometh that now we're jumping. I'm sorry, we're in Joseph Smith history still, verses 37 through 39.
What Moroni is speaking to him, and this is Malachi.
Yep, he's starting to talk to him and he's quoting Malachi. For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall burn as stubble. For they shall come, for they that come shall burn them. They that come. Did you hear that? So that's when the host comes back with Christ at the Olivet. That comes with them shall burn them. saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root or branch. And again he quoted the 5th verse thus: Behold, I reveal unto you the priesthood by the hand of Elijah the prophet, before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Quite often we read that and we're terrified. Oh, the dreadful day of the Lord. But we got to keep it in context. It is both contexts. We are going to see absolutely 2 outcomes. I think D&C 88 quotes a different total outcome after the half hour of silence than does the book of Revelation. The people in D&C 88 have a great day of the Lord. The people in Revelation get a dreadful day of the Lord. I think they are the converse of each other, the opposites.
Well, I think literarily, you could argue that, great wonders and miracles and everything. I mean, it's hard to separate those as
That's why I
polar
say they're
opposites because
almost reversal.
they work hand in hand.
Yes,
But at this time, there is a reversal of circumstances for the righteous and the wicked. Absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah, I think so. And he quoted the next verse differently. And he shall plant in the hearts of the children the promises made to the fathers, and the hearts of the children shall be turned to their fathers. Now, we equate that with temple work, and I think it absolutely is. But
Well,
what?
and of course, in some ways, this is a little bit of a prelude to Elijah coming at the Kirtland Temple to
Absolutely.
restore the sealing keys.
And what is the point of the sealing keys? I mean, what's
Well,
your,
if it were not so, the whole earth would be utterly wasted at his coming.
yeah, that we get that, and that's a statement. But what does that mean to you? I mean, what does that phrase, all of it, mean? I mean,
Are you asking
I,
a
I,
general hypothetical question?
I somebody was seeing if you had any input, but if you're not,
Yes, I absolutely do. Number one, of course, we're going to learn as the vision and the ordinances of the temple are revealed step by step. You are going to see that D&C 128, the restoration of baptism for the dead and ordinance work for the saving of your dead, is what Joseph Smith says the most glorious revelation, the ultimate thing that will cause that the whole earth will not be utterly wasted at his coming, because there will be salvation for the dead. There will be a way to tie everyone back to the Savior. But I think that sometimes we're so used to reading all of the temple ordinances and stuff in here that we read over some other really big ones in
okay,
here.
like for instance,
Like, for instance, when it says that he shall plant in the hearts of the children the promises that were made to the fathers.
so let's talk. What are the promises? What do you think the promises that were made to the fathers?
Oh my gosh, well, just think of the Abrahamic covenant. Just think of the Davidic covenant. There is always a promised land associated. I mean, it's actually called the promised land as part of the
Okay,
promises.
so the
Okay,
promise of Israel that it would go from the Nile to the Euphrates,
so we
the
have
land.
Israel yet that needs to inherit their promised lands. And by the way, I do believe that that has something to do with Elijah.
Well,
So
they definitely leave a seat for him at Passover.
So we still,
Um,
what we're looking at here is we're looking at a beginning phase of the restoration of the turning of the hearts of the children and to the promises that were made by the Father. But I think sometimes we don't study what those promises to the fathers were. Like, for instance, in the Book of Mormon, when the Lord tells Lehi that this is a promised land for his descendants, you
but I
know,
think
and
that's beautiful.
the Gentiles get numbered with them on this land. And like I say, I think we could do a whole lesson on exactly what the promises were that were made to the fathers and how Joseph Smith was laying the
So you're
foundation.
equating the fathers with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to a degree, the patriarchs.
Absolutely, yes,
Absolutely, I
the
agree with that.
patriarchs. Well, because they're listing Elijah as one of the patriarchs there. But here in Malachi, where it's saying these very verses in Malachi 4 5 and 6, we maybe it's because Moroni, it doesn't say that Moroni quoted it in the Joseph Smith history, but we know from all the other scriptures that he quoted that it's highly likely that he did, because the verse right before these two verses says, and remember the law of Moses with its
Oh, you talk.
statutes. And it's, I mean, this is Malachi chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. Verse 4, it says that in this end time prophecy that we're talking about, that Moses is involved in it too, and these promises that were made to the
What was
fathers.
Moses famous for? He's famous for the appointed time,
Well, he's
mostly.
in Leviticus, in the
Yeah.
law of Moses, in Leviticus 23. But also, I think that the reason Malachi focuses in on Moses and Elijah, number one, I want to make it very clear that the Lord never said, remember the law of Moses and keep all of its rituals and performances.
Yeah, never
No,
did.
it said, remember the statutes and commandments, those things that are the foundation of the kingdom of God, that which our Constitution and liberty was built on.
Yes,
Okay.
I love that.
So those are, there's a very specific part of the law of Moses that we're supposed to be paying
Yep.
attention to in the last days. But also, I think they have a mission that wasn't finished at the Kirtland Temple. I mean, even their appearances are going to show both phases of this. In the Kirtland Temple, it was the restoration of the sealing keys and temple ordinances and the gathering of Israel. But in the end time, when there's promised lands in Jerusalem
Yeah,
to be inherited, Moses and Elijah are going to be involved in that as well.
I love that. Now I'm going to give you a little of my take.
Okay.
Okay, and that is when it says, "He shall plant in the hearts of the children promises made to their fathers, and the hearts of the children shall turn to their fathers." I think personally, um, it's the whole concept is God's whole purpose is to make the family of Adam complete.
Yes.
Okay,
That
meaning
was the
that,
temple ordinance
yeah,
phase.
to seal it all together so that we are all one big family when it's all done. Those who still want to be, agency is always a part of this equation. If
And we often think of that sealing only in the sealing like we see in Revelation 7, where we're sealed in the forehead. And Joseph Smith says in the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith, that's getting your calling and election made sure. But we forget that there's another sealing. There's a sealing when Satan is sealed into a kingdom, and the
it's
lid
put on,
is
yeah,
put on that. What I'm saying is you want to be sealed up by the Lord. You don't want to be sealed
you
down
don't want to lid
with
on.
time out, you know?
Yeah.
And so yeah, the promises made to the fathers are not just the blessings. They're
So
also the cursings.
so it seems to me when Moroni came in these visions, which were four, he came four times with the same message. That's significant.
Well, and it
And
says that each time he said the same
added
thing
upon.
and more. I mean, what a great teacher he is.
Yeah, added upon. I love the fact that this is going to be fun for Rhonda. I love the
Of
fact that
course.
he gets in and quotes the 11th chapter of Isaiah.
Miss Isaiah.
Oh, right. Well, I don't think you would think you would miss Isaiah. No, I'm good. Saying that it was about to be fulfilled. So the 11th chapter of Isaiah, what is that all about? And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow up or grow out of his roots. This is Rhonda's
One of my favorite
favorite
verses.
quotes.
Yeah.
Just get into Isaiah and talk about the house of Israel, and it has kind of as it connects with Zenos's allegory and the way all these things interweave and
So
come.
did you put the picture that I drew for the kids
Yeah, we're
on
going to
that
get
verse?
there.
Okay.
And the spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, and the spirit of wisdom and understanding. So a branch shall grow up out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, and the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, and the Spirit of counsel and might, and the Spirit of knowledge, and of the fear of the Lord, and shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his
I think
ears.
that is so important.
That, I almost should have underlined that phrase. In the day we're headed into, I would argue with AI and everything that's coming down the pipe that that is absolutely critical information.
Well, so wait a minute. Are you telling me that this is a latter day prophecy for our day?
It has to be. connecting there. So he's saying, and shall make him quick of understanding and fear of the Lord, and shall not judge after the sight of his eyes. Meaning, we live in a day and age where you almost can't believe what you see because AI is going to be so good within the next few years, you're not going to be able to tell what's a real newscast and an AI newscast that's completely set in there. I mean, you already have slant put on newscasts, but what if you could actually see presidents or people saying things they didn't say or really do?
So we're
What if you could condemn them by video on things that they didn't really do because it was so perfect that it looked like them,
so
sounded like them?
it can be really easy if we're not careful here to read over this person. This is a person
That
coming
won't.
in the latter days to prepare the way of the Lord. Now, we could say, well, this is Joseph Smith. Moroni says that this is 11th chapter is about to be fulfilled, but hold the phone. The 11th chapter of Isaiah speaks about the lion laying down with the kid, and it moves
It's
into
millennial.
the
It's
millennial.
millennial
It's one
context,
of the biggest
or
millennial
I will say
challenges.
it's the wrapping into the millennial context.
Exactly. And so what we see here is that it was about to be fulfilled because it was being commenced. It was being started.
Yeah.
Again, like it's the same with the Book of Mormon. We have the first part, but we don't have the second part. So I just want to show, pay attention. It's Isaiah. I'm sorry. You got to pay attention to the 7 qualities of this person. That's this forerunner to the second coming of Christ. It says, and the millennial day. It says that the Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him, the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And he will make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord, and he will not judge with the sight of his eyes. He's full, it's sevenfold
And he will
full of the
righteousness
Spirit.
judge the poor. He will with equity for the meek. He shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, with the word he speaks, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. Wow, that's
So again, he comes
yeah.
to give the final warning against Babylon so that Babylon will fall, and because Babylon is going to fall, and he's going to warn, just like Lehi warns when
Yeah.
Jerusalem is going to fall.
So this is going to be fun because Rhonda obviously is our Isaiah girl, and we're going to go into and get to look at her artwork class. She graphically has drawn this up, and it's just beautiful. This is a plug, also. Isaiah Illustrated goes into all of this dynamics of Isaiah 11, but of all of Isaiah, for that matter, and it's really good. But by the way, we're almost out of the first printing, and we're not exactly sure how soon the next one's gonna get here, but I think it's gonna make it in time before we run out. But we're actually, I say first printing. That's not even true. This is our third printing.
Exactly right.
Okay, we're about to run out of our third printing of Isaiah Illustrated.
So I actually had to go over this drawing with Dr. Abraham Gileadi several times before he okayed it. He says he would have drawn it just a tiny bit differently, but he's basically okay
Right.
with the way it's drawn.
So this drawing that we're talking about shows graphically what we're talking about happening over the course of time with the house of Israel, with the natural brand, the olive tree.
And that first verse right there, the whole thing is in the first verse.
Yeah. So this is really fascinating, and I don't know that we got time to dissect this completely in this class.
Let me just do a quick,
Okay, let's do that.
200-foot overview or something like that.
200, maybe a 20,000 foot.
20,000.
No,
Oh,
that's okay.
okay. All right. Well, let's try this. Number 1, notice the colors. Okay, the green always represents the time when Christ came the first time. Okay,
Okay.
right. The orange always represents the time of the.
Just so you know, that kind of looks brown to me, but orange, she calls it.
Yep,
Okay.
orange is for the time of the Gentiles. And then the purple is your millennial color. Okay.
Which is what we're headed into, which is why I believe the angel Moroni brought this to Joseph, as he's trying to say,
goodness, of course.
your mission is to get us to this millennium.
Isaiah 11 is telling the whole thing.
Yeah.
This is how it works. This is how it's, because Joseph Smith, I believe, is the rod here. He's that orange part. The angel Moroni tells him that he's bringing in the fullness of the Gentiles. All right, so what happened in the green part?
With the mission to save Israel.
Yes, in the green part, we had the first coming of Christ where he was rejected. And so the fig tree was cursed, and we have a cut down tree because Israel was scattered. Okay. And then we have the taking of the gospel to the nations. And so that's represented in this piece in Isaiah 11 as a water sprout. In Hebrew, it's the hoiter, and it's that
Sprig
well, it's a little branch that grows up
from
from
below the
below the
graft.
graft from the root of the tree. Okay,
Sucker, sometimes
and
referred to.
normally we will prune these off, right? And but in this case, because the tree has died, we are
Well, it
going
hasn't
to
died. The roots have not died, but the
right. The
rest of the
roots are
tree.
still alive. Remember, it says that
So
the roots are still
the
alive.
roots need something.
Right. So that we're going to let this water sprout or this shoot that's going to spring up from this stalk of Jesse. Who is Jesse?
Father of David.
David's father. So this is Davidic covenant. This is King David. This is Jesus Christ, the greatest Davidic king. And it's this forerunner guy that's going to come and lay the foundation for this work in the end time, which is why Moroni is quoting it to him. Okay. So that shoot, that rod in the King James Version is going to spring up and keep the tree alive. Okay. And this branch, this rod, this hoiter, is going to be cut down. In Isaiah chapter 10, which was the verse right before Isaiah chapter 11, it calls this king of Assyria, this end time bad guy, the axe that's chopping down the trees. Okay. So this is what Moroni is going to call a cutoff point. We've talked about it before, this point when there is a physical destruction, an invasion of Babylon, an
which we would
invasion of
refer to as this crossover event that happens at Adam Adamah, more than likely.
exactly, and we call it in the last days the fall of Babylon. Okay, and at this time, there it is a very physical, a very real cut-off point for a nation who has spurned their God. Okay, and I'm quoting Isaiah again. So that's what happens at the end of the time of the Gentiles. But of course, the faithful, that part of the rod that is not being cut down, that is going to receive the branches that are grafted in. So that is your returning Israelites, and they are, and the Gentiles are becoming numbered with them, and they're becoming one branch, which will become our millennial tree, where we've got all of the branches, Judah, Joseph, the sticks in Ezekiel. They're coming together and becoming one in God's hand. Okay, so this is the imagery that is being shown here. A shoot will spring up from the stalk of Jesse, and in the end time, this is a millennial point. Uh-oh, I'm going to need the other one back. A branch from its graft. So there's its graft. The branch will bear fruit in the millennial kingdom. Okay. All right.
Graft is the greater house of Israel.
Yes. Yes. Now, you also need to realize that in Isaiah 11 verse 10, remember, he quotes the whole chapter all the way to the lions laying down with the lambs and everything. But in verse 10, you have this runner, this forerunner, going and conquering the cities that are listed in Isaiah 11 in the exact same order that King David conquered the cities as he took back the promised land. So now we're getting back to the promises made to the fathers, and all of this stuff is being talked about in Isaiah chapter 11. So Joseph Smith is going to ask some questions in the Doctrine and Covenants about this, and we're going to see that the rod and this sprig in verse 10 are people. Okay, so here it says in verse 4 of D&C 113, what is the shoot or that rod, that hoiter water sprout that we talked about that came up from in the time of the Gentiles? Okay, he says, behold, thus saith the Lord, it is a servant in the hands of Christ. Now he's partly a descendant of Jesse, as well as of Ephraim and the house of Joseph. So notice here, this particular dude is of the house of Joseph with the emphasis on Ephraim, which is going to be, and because he's a rod, a hoiter, that means he's a wild branch. He's a Gentile. And so remember that Joseph Smith says that in DNC 109 verse 60 that we are the Gentiles. Okay, he is numbered with the Gentiles in the Book of Mormon. And if Joseph Smith is calling himself as numbered with the Gentiles, then that in some degree applies to all of us in America. Okay, those in First Nephi 13 and 14, Columbus is pictured there coming to America, and he's a Gentile, and all of
Numbered with Gentiles.
yes, we're in the Book of Mormon, we're Gentiles on this land. Okay, all right. So in the next verse, we have go ahead and give me the next verse there. We have the question, what is the sprig in verse 10? Now, in verse 1, we see that it's a branch. The branch is going to grow from the graft. But in verse 10, this is the beginning phase. This is a sprig that's going to become the branch, but it has to grow, right? And so this is the sprig in verse 10 that begins to conquer the cities the same as David did in his regaining of the promised lands. And when Joseph Smith asks about this sprig, or in the King James translation, it's called a root, in verse 10, and by the way, I very much appreciate Abraham's translation here. He's getting the Hebrew words exactly right. It's a shoot that's, or a hoiter, this piece that comes up from the bottom, the shoot that springs up from the stalk of Jesse, and then the branch from the graft will bear fruit. Okay, so this is catching the nuance of those
When the
key
branch
words.
gets spliced back in, or in essence,
Right.
Israel. I think it's really fascinating from our studies of the Old Testament when you evaluate what Israel means. It's covenant.
Yeah.
It's when you
Sons
become
of God.
covenant. That's covenant, Gentile, covenant nation, whatever.
Ish is like I Israel is the
Yeah.
sons of God.
So
So this the Lord answers Joseph Smith here and says that this sprig that's going to be the branch in the end time, he says it is a descendant of Jesse. So he's a descendant of David as well as of Joseph. So notice here in the first one with the rod, the focus was on Ephraim, partly of Jesse, but Ephraim. Remember, in the last days, pretty much all the lineages are going to be mixed to some degree or another, right?
right.
I like what my dear friend that is a genealogist, he says, really genealogy, when you get this far down the generations, is more of a bush, it all kind of interconnects, right? But anyway, and more than a family tree. But it goes on to say that the priesthood rightly belongs to this descendant of Jesse or David. And if you cross-reference rightly through the scriptures, you'll see then the ones that have a right to the priesthood in the Doctrine and Covenants are the descendants of Aaron. So he has Aaronic right to the priesthood by descent and the keys of the kingdom. So he is going to be what Isaiah calls the ensign that comes and is going to cause the great gathering of the people in the end time. And of course, Joseph Smith is the rod is very similar. He's doing phase 1. This one in verse 6 is kind of phase 2. Okay.
Right.
So let's go ahead and continue on. And yeah, this is the cutoff point. Isaiah 10 verses 5 and 15. It says that this king of Assyria, he's the axe, and that
Right.
he and the saw, and he's chopping down or
The polluted Gentiles, in
in
essence, the apostate Gentiles who haven't come under covenant.
yes, and in Isaiah's time, it was the king of Assyria coming from the north. In Daniel's time, it's Babylon coming in. And in this end time fall of Babylon, we often call him like the Antichrist, or
Double cross.
yes, or possibly the little horn will be involved in the
Well, the
treading
little
down
horn
of
is
this
definitely a
paint.
translator.
Yeah, and then so but go ahead and show what
Okay.
happens at that point.
Yeah. Then if you connect that with all the other connecting things that we've talked about, the burning.
Remember Malachi, they that come will burn them up,
Yeah.
the root and the branch that don't repent.
Right. Okay. So moving along, we're going to go ahead through Isaiah 11 a little bit. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. A wolf shall also dwell with the lamb. Now we've gone into millennial typology. And the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf with the young lion, and the fatling together, and the little child shall lead them, and the cow shall bear and the bear shall feed. So what we're doing right now is just talking about a millennial time. So what we did is we just jumped from Isaiah telling about this transitional time to now we're in the millennial time.
So remember, it says Isaiah 11, the whole chapter is about to be fulfilled. Okay. And then also, are you going to say something about the kinds of animals?
Well, it's just clean and unclean,
So
but
representing what?
Israel and
Right. So your
Gentiles.
ethnic lineages of Israel, your 10
Yes.
tribes, your
So what it
Jews,
amounts to is when you have
Lamanites
come under covenant.
are going to lie down with the wild animals, the lions.
So I want to
And they're going to become, just like in the imagery of the branches, they become one. He's doing it here with the images of the animals.
I want to
They become one as well.
gotcha. I want to address something right here that I think is so overlooked. And we've talked about it, but you don't hardly hear anybody else talking about it. And that is most people think that once the millennium started, game over. Okay, it's all done. When the millennium starts, the everything's over as far as, and we're automatically in this paradisiacal state. But I want to read that statement coming up there. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Well, if they will not destroy the holy mountain, then what we're really saying is the millennium starts geographically in the promised lands, or the promised land here in America and in old world Jerusalem, before it starts everywhere else. That it's not an instantaneous transition of the whole earth. It is a progressive transition. And there's got to be somebody that does not hurt my holy mountain, meaning they're not part of it yet. They're in the process. I love the way Joseph Smith put it, that when the stone cut forth without hands rolls forth, it's not like a bowling ball hitting a
It's not a
strike.
meteorite coming.
Yeah, and it hits a strike and it blows up the kingdom of the world. He defined it as a grinding away of the nations of the world.
And the people
Daniel
choosing to be a part of that kingdom rather than that kingdom that's oppressing and
in
persecuting.
Daniel chapter 8, it actually, I think it's 8, might be 7. Pretty sure it's 8. In Daniel chapter 8, but no, it is 7.
Are you talking about the stone cut out without hands?
No,
Because that's two.
I know that's 2, but what I'm talking about is the fact that when the fall of the fourth kingdom of Daniel, the other ones remain a while. They're not instantly wiped out, but it takes time for them to assimilate, I guess would be the word I would use. So just don't think of the millennium as a instantaneous event. A lot
Or
of
like, even though in the scriptures it's actually called the end of the world, the wicked part of the world, it's the beginning. It's a new birth. Remember that when
always
you're
is.
baptized, it's the end of the old self, but the beginning of the new.
I can't help but think of us standing on the edge of the coastline in Hawaii as the volcanic lava just poured
It
into
was
the ocean,
incredible.
and just seeing that, and you were witnessing
It was like honey.
destruction and creation going on simultaneously
Because
as
it was building all the new land that
new real estate was being formed. And in fact, in that big eruption of Pu'u, where it came down and wiped out all that area down there by oh, I'm trying to remember the names.
lava hot
Just
springs.
no, yeah, just around those hot springs and around everything that wasn't lava hot springs. But anyway, in that area, it literally created like 5 acres of new earth.
Right.
So that's
I actually labeled that photograph "Destruction Meets Creation."
yeah. So that's exactly what the millennium will be. It will be destruction meets creation of a new and greater time. Okay, in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, and it shall stand for an ensign of the people, which we kind of read contextually in those graphic forms. And it shall the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious. So in essence, in the envy of Ephraim, and I'm going to jump to the
Okay,
bottom.
so that right there, the root of Jesse, that's the sprig that we were talking about. And then you can see right there, the Lord will set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of the people. That is a huge linking phrase that we won't have time to go into right now. But he's going to talk about the envy of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. So part of the reason why Ephraim and Judah become one in God's hand is because they have enemies,
Absolutely.
mutual
And
enemies.
I guess what I was loving that part where it said he shall set up an ensign for the nations and shall assemble the outcast of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Now, a lot of people would say that's premillennial, but I'm telling you that could be part of the transitional millennium. I don't think we like to think millennium starts with peace all over the world. But if you read it here, you begin to understand that this is a progressive process.
And so we have Joseph Smith beginning the gathering,
Yes.
phase one. This is God's gathering, phase two, right?
And then it goes on to say that the envy also of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. I heard a podcaster say, well, there's so much prophecy that has to happen before the millennium starts. They haven't really studied out what Joseph Smith said, that the transition between the premillennial day and the post-millennial day, if you want to call it the transition, will be started with the cleansing. And it's not
Cutoff point for the wicked.
yeah, it's not, and it's not an instantaneous event. We all want to think it's just a snap of the fingers event, but he actually says it's ongoing. And when you read the sixth seal and the seventh seal in the book of Revelation, you realize there's a lot of overlapping prophetic pictures between the two.
Or, in the words we started with when we were talking about the noonday, it dawns.
Yep.
And there's a twilight and there's a
Yeah. And
noonday.
everybody wants to say, well, the millennium starts with peace and prosperity. I can't even smoke.
Prosperity.
There you go. Thank you. And that all of a sudden, as soon as the millennium starts, everything's great. Well, that's not really backed up by what the prophet Joseph taught. That is kind of an inherited perspective. It is really starts. I actually believe now that it starts at the crossover event at Adam on Almond. And
That is one point that and I can show that in the deliveries and the labors in Isaiah, that's when the child is born. But I actually believe that Joseph Smith was laying the foundation for the millennial
oh,
kingdom.
absolutely.
It's dawning already, but
Definitely.
darkness comes first.
Yep. So I think this is all more progressional than most of us have thought, because I heard podcasters say, "Oh, we got lots. There's too many prophecies that have to be fulfilled before the millennium can start, before Christ can come." I don't think that's the full context of the way Joseph taught it. I think he taught that this is a progressive scenario. They shall fly upon the shoulders of the palace of Palestine toward the west.
Philistine.
Yeah, the Philistines. I'm sorry, I said Palestine. I've been over there lately. To the west, and they shall spoil them of the east together, and shall lay their hand upon Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall obey them.
This is the order in which David conquered the
So
promised land.
this whole discussion from the river to the sea is not going to go exactly the way they think.
And that's another lesson.
Yeah, that's a whole nother lesson.
Psalm 83.
And the Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea, and with his mighty wind shall he shake his land over the river, and he shall smite it in the seven streams, and make men go over dry shod. And there shall be a highway from the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, like as it was to Israel in the day when he came out of the land of Egypt. So we're about to see just a lot of stuff happening, but stop thinking instantaneous.
And here
This is a progressive series of events.
And here we're seeing a deliverance of Zion in the last days that parallels when the God of heaven and earth came and rescued his people Israel, as in the days of Egypt, when they were in bondage by Pharaoh. And this imagery is throughout the scriptures.
And there's a lot of replacement theology that even some of the great people believe that ancient Israel is not where this is going to take place. They try to equate everything to
This new
this land,
promised land,
yeah, to the new Jerusalem and the new,
which is a promised land as well.
absolutely. And I believe there's types and shadows overlapping
Yes.
back and forth, but never discount the text.
Promises made to the fathers
Yeah.
in Jerusalem.
Yeah, never discount the text. It's absolutely applies. I love what a good friend of mine says. If you want to know where we are in prophecy, keep an eye on Jerusalem. And I think that's absolutely true. And that's the old Jerusalem.
Well, I like what one of my friends said. He said, if you trust that your God is going to save Zion and deliver Zion and be a keeper of the promises, then
You also
you
better
be
understand.
saving Jerusalem
Yeah,
as well, because if he can break his promises to them, what makes you think he would keep his promises to you?
He absolutely is a promise keeper. So he's going to keep his promises.
Yeah.
To the literal translation of the words. Okay. Then he goes on in Joe Smith's history to say that he quoted the 3rd chapter of Acts, the 22nd and 23rd verse, precisely as it stands in our New Testament. And that prophet was Christ, but the day had not come when they would not hear his words should be cut off from among the people, but soon would come. Now, soon obviously is at least 200 years.
The tithing of the time of the Gentiles.
It is obvious, and I'm going to show that here in a minute. Moses truth, and let's go now. We're to Acts.
I was just going to say, most people know this, but of course, Peter is quoting Joel in Acts, the 22nd chapter, in the I'm sorry, in the 3rd chapter, in the 22nd and 23rd verses. Peter is quoting Moses. Moroni is quoting Peter in Acts, who is quoting Moses in Deuteronomy 18, who is talking about the prophet greater than himself that would come, which is Christ.
Exactly.
And that when that happens, those who will not hear the words of Christ will be cut off. And so again, this cutoff point is a real destruction.
Absolutely, but it's also progressive, and it has 2 phases. It had the phase that happened in 70 AD for the Jews, and it has a phase 2
at the time of the fall of Babylon.
At the time of the fall of Babylon. Every soul that will not hear is destroyed from
everyone that will not hear the words of Christ, the voice of Christ is the key point there.
And if you won't hear it, you're spiritually cut off first.
Yes.
And then temporally.
Many levels. Yes.
So don't ever discount the fact that that's multi-layered fulfilled. It was fulfilled directly for them at that day, for those who would not hear the word, but it is an ongoing fulfillment.
Now you put your head in Moroni saying this last part to Joseph.
Which is what he would.
For Moses truly said to the fathers,
okay,
a prophet shall the Lord God raise up unto you of your brethren like unto me. Guys, this is not Joseph Smith. This is Jesus that he's talking about. Him you must hear in all things, whatsoever he says to you. And it shall come to pass that every soul which will not hear that prophet, we just saw that prophet is Christ, will be destroyed from among the people. And it, like you said, spiritually first, but there is a cutoff point.
Temporal cutoff point.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, I love Rhonda's millennial timeline that she put together that shows these
ages,
backstories and ages of time. And you see there that the wheat, you got the time of the patriarchs, then you got the time of the barley harvest, which was from Moses to Christ. Then you have from Christ to Christ again.
The cutoff point.
Yeah.
The end of the time of the Gentiles.
End of the time of the Gentiles being 2,000 years. And then you could zero right into the last 200 years being the tithe of the time of the Gentiles.
The fullness.
The fullness of the Gentiles.
Yes.
He also quoted the 2nd chapter of Joel from the 28th verse to the last, and also said that this was not yet fulfilled, but would soon be. And he farther stated that the fullness of the Gentiles was soon to come in. He quoted many other passages of scripture and offered many explanations which cannot be mentioned.
We kind of talked about a lot of those in the restoration, our very first video
Yeah.
for Doctrine and
So
Covenants.
this is incredible that he distinguished like this millennial timeline, these times that we're talking about, and how they break right on cue with um, these backstory of the creation of the earth, really.
And the festivals and the appointed times and the agricultural harvests of Israel. And
So this is beautiful. How much was given in that night to Joseph Smith that he probably was digesting for years?
well, I think he had a bigger vision of what was going on than most of us give him credit for, because Moroni taught him
Directly.
hours and hours, and you add the appointments as he goes to the hill every year, days
Yeah, that's
of
beautiful.
teaching.
Okay, then moving on. Well, actually, we're going to just look at Joel chapter 2, verses 28 through 32. And it shall come to pass afterwards that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. So this is after that. Now we're in millennial day. He just kind of transitioned into a millennial day. He pour out.
But there's a level of
It's a
preliminary.
yeah. I was going to say the fullness of the Gentiles, the fullness of the time of the Gentiles. So this is all progressing into the millennial
And
day.
at the beginning, at the time of the Gentiles, Peter's quoting these
Yeah, that's
verses.
true.
And
So it's not limited to. This is a progression of experience here. Anyway, and it came to pass afterwards that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions.
Peter quoted those too.
Absolutely.
They said, "You guys are all drunk," and he says, "No, this is the fulfillment of Joel.
Yep, the timing.
It's a
And,
restoration."
and also upon the servants and upon the handmaidens in those days will I pour out my spirit. And I will show wonders in heaven and on the earth. The reason I kind of pointed at the end is this part right here. And the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. There's your nukes,
Signs to the
probably.
Gentiles and signs to the house of Israel, solar and lunar.
And the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord shall come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be delivered.
There it is.
Mostly spiritual first. It's like we said before, spiritual first. This is the opposite
This is the
of
physical
temporal.
one, right?
Yeah.
And check it out.
For in the Mount Zion and in Jerusalem
And
shall be deliverance. So he's very clear that it's in both places, as the Lord has said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. So this is our hope, in a sense. This is kind of our optimism.
now we're back to the piece of the rod and the sprig that are the remnant that are
Exactly.
going to survive, that are going to hopefully not just survive, but be delivered.
Yeah. And again, he told me that when I got those plates from which he had spoken, for the time that they should be obtained was not yet fulfilled. And I should not show them to any person, neither the breastplates with the Urim and Thummim, only to those whom I should be commanded to show them. If I did show, or excuse me, if I did, I should be destroyed. That's pretty powerful words. While I was conversing, or while he was conversing with me about the plates, the vision was open to my mind that I could see the place where the plates were deposited, and that so clearly and distinctly that I knew the place again when I visited it. So he got a pretty clear vision of where it was.
And in understand that even from this early time, he understood that he could be destroyed,
Yes.
because we're going to see this in the next lesson at the loss of the 116 pages and
And he's
the
pretty mournful.
anguish that
Absolutely. He thought he blew it.
Yeah.
I think, a lot of people talk about how in 1823 that the reason he wasn't able to pull the plates right then was because he wasn't worthy. And I would say, yes, worthy is probably the wrong word. Wasn't ready. That's probably a better word. He wasn't ready
I
yet.
would say it's yes and yes. Yeah.
But I think the Lord deliberately showed him this 4 years ahead of time so he would be ready, so that when he did pull it in trumpets of 27, it was on the appointed time. So this was all planned to give him 4 years of prep time.
Oh, and Moroni's being careful to say, come on September the 22nd. every
Yeah.
year.
Yep.
And Moroni's being careful to say, in 4 years, it's going to be time to get the plates and start. Moroni is planning
This preparation
for
for
something.
yeah, he's prepping for this time. And after this communication, I saw the light of the room begin to gather immediately around the person of him who had been speaking to me. And it continued to do so until the room again was left dark, except just around him, when when instantly I saw, as it were, a conduit open right into heaven, and he ascended till his entirety disappeared, and the room was left as it had been before the heavenly light had made its appearance. I kind of love this picture of him on top of the Salt Lake Temple
Yeah,
with
it's
the
beautiful.
darkness below and ascending, and
Yeah.
him going up. I actually loved it so much I kept it for 2 slides.
Okay.
And then again, or he commenced again to relate the same vision which he had done in his first vision without the least variation.
In
Which
his first visit, we
visit?
want to,
Yeah,
yeah, we
that's
don't want
right.
to mix
Sorry
that
about that.
up with
Sorry about that.
the
First,
first vision.
um, first visit without the least variation, which having done, he informed me of the great judgments which were coming upon the earth, and the great desolation of famine, sword, and pestilence, and that these grievous judgments would come on the earth in this generation. Having related these things, he again ascended as he had done before. So this pattern repeats 3 times in the night, and once the next morning as he falls over the fence trying to get back home. So Moroni was very serious about making an impression on Joseph's mind, to give him this experience and this vision,
Well,
added upon each time a little more 4 times.
and I think that we need to remember that just as the salvation and the deliverance is escalating all the way to the millennial day here, these judgments and these things are escalating as
All the
well.
way, yeah. By this time, so deep were the impressions made upon my mind, I bet. If an angel had come to me 4 times in a night and I was wiped out, yeah, I guess that's a big impression. That sleep had fled from my eyes, and I lay overwhelmed in astonishment what I had both seen and heard. But what was my surprise when again I beheld the same messenger at my bedside. So this is the third time before morning, and I heard him rehearse and repeat all over again to me the same things as before, and added a caution to me, telling me that Satan would try to tempt me in consequence of the indignant circumstances,
Indigent.
indigent, okay, circumstances of my father's
So
death,
I just want to,
or the
yeah, I
fact,
want to stop right here and realize that, when Moroni visits him right here in September, um, it will be in November. So 2 months, just a few weeks from right now, that his brother Alvin will die.
passes away.
And Alvin is like 22 years old, and he is the oldest main person helping to build the house. They have a heavy payment to make on the Smith
Farm.
farm every year, and they are standing in danger of losing the farm.
So it's
And they
natural for him to be
lost
concerned. Yeah.
Alvin. Yeah, and so of course Alvin isn't gone yet. As a matter of fact, it's really cool to know that from this time of their visit with the angel Moroni in those next 2 months, Lucy Mack Smith is going to say that they're going to have like family home evenings a lot, and they're going to be like, everybody get your work done early so that we can sit down, and Joseph can tell stories that Moroni has shown him
In
about
vision, yeah.
the peoples of the Book of Mormon, about Moroni's people. He learned so much more than we have recorded in our canonized
Sure. Well, that's
scriptures.
that's like the difference of watching somebody's a record of something compared to going there yourself.
And
It's like
remember
watching a
Joseph said,
video on a tour of Israel and then going on a tour,
right, or Joseph Smith saying you could learn more at 5 minutes
looking at
being
that.
being in the spirit of God than you can by reading all the books on the earth. And so it's just beautiful to me that Alvin on his deathbed is going to be saying, please be faithful. Joseph,
Be
get the
faithful.
plates. I mean, and the pulling together of their
So
family.
the natural desire to want to help the family is going to be on Joseph's mind, which isn't even a selfish desire directly. And yet the angel says, he has forbid me, saying that I must have no other object in view in getting the plates, but to glorify God, and must not be influenced by any other motive that than that of the building of his kingdom. Otherwise, I could not get them. That's a pretty tall order when you're so
Especially when one of the,
poverty and strict and
right, and one of the first things the angel Moroni told him is that the record is written on what?
gold plates.
Gold plates. He says
Yep,
you
very
cannot, you can't be thinking
tempted by that.
gold,
Okay.
you know.
So, shortly after I rose from my bed, as usual, went to the necessary labors of the day, but in attempting to work as the other times, I found my strength so exhausted, this is worn out by the spiritual experience, this 440 vision, so to speak, as to render my entirety unable. My father, who was laboring along with me, discovered something to be wrong with me and told me to go home. I started with the intention of getting to the house, but in attempting to cross the fence out of the field where we were, my strength entirely failed me, and I fell helplessly on the ground, and for a time was quite unconscious of anything. The first thing that I can recollect was the voice speaking unto me, calling me by name again. I can just imagine Joseph. I looked up and beheld the same messenger standing over my head, surrounded by light, as before. He then again related unto me all that he had related to me the previous night, and commanded me to go to my father and tell him the vision
I love that.
and commandment which I had received. So he asked him to go and check in with his father and tell him the vision. The thing I love about this is not only did he send him to his father, but his father completely responded in a incredible manner. You know,
Well, his father himself, Joseph Smith Sr., was a visionary man, and that's from the visions that he had. That was part of the reason that Joseph Smith Sr. had not joined any of
yeah,
the
it's
religions
true.
yet. You
I
know,
read that history also. I obeyed and returned to my father in the field and rehearsed the whole matter to him. He replied to me that it was of God and told me to go and do as commanded by the messenger. I left the field and went to the place where the messenger had told me the plates were deposited. And owing to the distinction or the distinctness of the vision which I had concerning it, I knew the place the instant I arrived there. So that's beautiful. He's able to just go right to it. I made an attempt to take them out, but was forbidden by the messenger, and again informed me that the time of bringing them forth had not yet arrived. That's where we're going to go next. Prophetic appointed times and places.
I read it. Neither would it until 4 years from that time, but told me that I should come to that place precisely in 1 year, September 22nd, from that, because we're on a solar calendar from that time, and that he would meet with me, and I should continue to come precisely at that time each year. And each time I did, I found the same messenger there.
Accordingly, as I had commanded, I went at the end of each year and found the same messenger, like she just said. And respecting what the Lord was going to do and how and in what manner the kingdom was to be conducted in the last days. So this is great.
Instruction from Moroni.
Yep, a ton of instruction. Can you imagine if you had a what a tithing settlement every year with Angel Moroni, so to
Yeah.
speak?
Have you been
Oh,
called?
whatever.
How are you doing?
Yeah, it's just kind of, are you on track? This is your, are you preparing for this great mission you're about to
I
have?
love that he hints to Joseph that there are things that that are part of his preparations. Like he says that there'll be a person that you're supposed to bring when you come get the plates, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, but you'll know who it is.
Well,
By
obviously, it's his
that
wife.
it's Emma, right?
That's beautiful. Okay. At length, the time arrived for obtaining the plates and the urim and thummim and the breastplates on the 22nd day of September 1827, having gone as usual at the end of another year to the place where they were deposited. I love that word, at the end of another year. Well,
I
what
know.
year are we talking?
That's a Hebrew
That's a
calendar.
Hebrew year, Ed.
Moroni,
Okay.
just a little Hebrew.
The same heavenly measure delivered them to me with this charge that I should be responsible for them, and if I should let them go carelessly or through any neglect of mine, I should be cut off.
There it is again.
But that if I would use
Destroyed.
all of my endeavors to preserve them until he, the messenger, should call for them, they should be protected. So that's pretty big. So the big day. What's this big day? Well, we get to go to a Hebrew calendar and we get to see that the 22nd there of September 1827 is highlighted and circled in yellow because it is Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets, Tishri 1. September 22nd, 1827, an appointed time for the blowing of trumpets, for Moroni. So we see Moroni on the tops of our temples blowing the trumpet, this great trumpet that was sounded by him in 1827.
So on the Day of Trumpets in Israel, they blow these ram's horns called the shofars, and there are 4 distinct blasts that they play on those horns. The first one is the teruah, and it's a moaning sound that is a call for repentance. It's a low high signal. And then the second sound that they play on the shofar is a rapid fire, 9 notes in a row, like an alarm or like there's a warning going forth.
I should have brought it for you.
Yeah, we should have played it. Yes. And then the third sound that they make is the last sound that they make is the tekiah gadol, which is a long, 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 long.
As long as you can hold it.
And then, but you have to save enough breath to hit a punch at the end. And it is a sound that signifies that the king is coming. So it's a call to gather Israel. It's a call to repent. It's a sound of an alarm. And it is the preparation for the king is coming. And that is what is being sounded on the Day of Trumpets. And it is that day that the Book of Mormon comes forth.
From the angel Moroni.
The calling together, the calling to repent, the sound of alarm, and the announcement that the king is coming.
Anyway, so let's just look at all the days that he went there. The Feast of Trumpets in 1823 was not the 22nd, it was September 6th. The Feast of Trumpets in 1824 was the 23rd.
Because their lunar calendar interfaces with our solar calendar and kind of walks around a little bit.
The Feast of Trumpets in 1825 is the 13th of September. The Feast of Trumpets in 1826 is October 2nd, which matches Feast of Trumpets.
So it's like Moroni knows when the solar calendar and the lunar calendar
are going to link up on September 22nd, 1827. Big day, appointed time, appointed place. And Rhonda went through all the things that the Lord did to the Smith family to get them to Palmyra in the appointed place, where the hill Cumorah was, at the appointed time, so that Joseph could be there for his divine appointment.
And it was not random.
And it was not random. And with that, thank you so much. This is just an incredible thing to know that Joseph Smith was called for an appointed work at an appointed time, at an appointed place, for an appointed mission. And with that,
To lay the foundation for the second coming of Christ.
So let us remember the prophets who came with visions of hope. They called out our names. In gatherings of hearts, we find our way home. United in purpose, we're never alone. As the sun sets low, painting skies of gold, we carry their messages, their tales to be told. In the warmth of communion, we find our way free, the legacy of faith, in joy and in pain. Oh, doctrine and covenants, words written in grace, revealing our journey, leading us to a sacred place. With every first song, we feel the peace descend. In the whispers of the past, our spirits mend. So here's to the journey, to paths yet unknown. With faith as our compass, we'll never be alone. In the echoes of history, a love that is true. In doctrine and covenants, our hearts will renew.